Welcome into NFL Kickoff Live. It's the best hour of football talk every single Friday. We will go around the NFL, talk about every team and every game, and we'll get local insight you can't get anywhere else but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tanitra Batiste. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis and Kyle Krabs. And all right, guys, although I'd prefer not to talk about this for obvious reasons, we'll go straight to Thursday Night Football. God. Okay, all right. I've got myself together. I promise. But anyway, I don't think my team has themselves together because the Steelers just absolutely crapped the bed, no pun intended, last night in losing to yet another 2-win team, that of the New England Patriots. So now you're kind of looking at a situation where, great, the Patriots are off the schneid. They get a win, whoop-de-doo. But ultimately, it just feels like trouble in paradise, meaning Pittsburgh. But on the same token, it might make for some interesting or intriguing updates to the situation for the Patriots as far as where they might go in the draft. So with that said, the report is that the Bears might be looking to draft Caleb Williams, trade Justin Fields. And now that the Patriots have won that game, Kyle, that may actually impact where they go in the draft. But first things first, before we even talk about the draft, let's just talk about that ish show that was that Thursday night football game, the 21-18 Patriots win over the Steelers.
I want to know what happened. We just got done throwing Pittsburgh a parade for getting 400 yards offense 2 weeks ago. And then you can lose at home to Arizona, who's 3-10, and the Patriots, who are 3-10 now as well. And I get it. Kenny Pickett's out for this game. Mitchell Trubisky looks like Chicago. Speaking of Chicago Mitchell Trubisky, or at least the one down the stretch. Nothing going, no comprehensive reads. You could see the wide receivers are pulling their hair out through their helmets during the play because of just how incohesive this offensive effort was. And I mean, you give some credit from clawing back from 21-3, but how does this defense get in a position to be down 21-3 with what New England's offensive attack has looked like the last couple weeks or months? So a disaster turn of events for Pittsburgh, who, they're coming off the win against Cincinnati. They won that game on the road. And you said, okay, now here's the point where we could really clinch a winning season, another one for Mike Tomlin. And now you're floating around 503. Your last 4 games are on the road. This might be the year it doesn't happen for Mike Tomlin. And I know there's kind of some rumblings right now around it would a mutually agreed upon change be best for all parties here at the end of the season, just because Pittsburgh's felt like they've kind of plateaued.
Yeah.
And this is as bad as it gets. I mean, last night was a rough watch if you were a neutral fan just watching that football game.
Yeah. And imagine if you're not a neutral fan, how painful that watch was, because I almost tapped out and then the Steelers scored a touchdown and then I got excited all for naught. But a couple things there, like you said, TJ Watt got banged and that kind of affected him for a little while. Alex Highsmith had an injury as well, I think to the neck. So that was kind of a challenge, if you will. But hey, DeMonte KZ and all you other people who were on that field, other than that one person, I know, Jarvis, you would love me if I hit that KZ. But, there were guys who they made plays, like Michael Walker did make a play, former Falcons, DeMonte KZ, but there were just too many moments where they didn't make plays or they didn't finish a play like it could have or should have been finished. And that was a part of the challenge that Minka Fitzpatrick called out across the defense and the entire team post-game. But like you said, also the offense, it was just painful because there was George Pickett, Jarvis, there, free. There was Deontay Johnson in position to take it to the house. You can't put the ball where it's supposed to be, and you can't make the decision in your reads. Your decision was to take off at the wrong time when the right guy was open, and that is a recipe for disaster. But I do want to piggyback on what KC says before we go into the draft talk, and that's this. I do think that this might be a situation where I know we've got 4 games left in the season, but Mike Tomlin and his regime may have really hit the plateau. And I think this may be an Andy Reid situation where you just mutually agree to part ways. It doesn't mean by any stretch of the imagination that Tomlin's coaching career in the NFL is over. He'll have a job the next day. But it just may mean that the road in Pittsburgh for him has in all likelihood come to an end, because maybe not so much of a rebuild, but this darn sure feels like a reset.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a reset, because I really feel like it's time. And that's not an indictment against Mike Tomlin, because things, it's like a marriage that, the fire is just all gone and people just kind of really sticking around for the kids. It's just like, all right, I love you, babe. Oh, I love you too. Oh, you never had a losing season. Oh, okay, that's fine. We're gonna bounce back and get into the playoffs, but we ain't got a chance to really win it all. Yeah, that's fine too. So I think now you're starting to move into a situation where, okay, let's figure this thing out, because at the end of the day, I think we all can agree that Kenny Pickett is not the quarterback of the future, right?
Yeah.
So if there's a situation where you start losing games and you get into a position where you might be able to get one of those guys, one of those quarterbacks, there's going to be a lot to choose from in that first round. Do you really want to try to, use this same regime who just fired their offensive coordinator, who probably shouldn't have been the offensive coordinator coming into the season, because a lot of people were calling for their heads. I know you were, T. So now it's like, all right, I don't want this regime picking my quarterback of the future, because everybody understands what the situation is there. So I think if you mutually part ways, and I think you're also correct too, T, because Mike Tomlin, he will have a job, and I know we're going to talk about it later here, and I have the perfect spot for him, where he could take over, and I'm pretty sure there'll be Super Bowl contenders almost immediately if they're able to make that hire.
Indeed. And Kyle, that kind of segues into that talk about the draft, because I think Jarvis makes an excellent point. One of the downsides of the winning records that Mike Tomlin has had, especially over the decade and a half since the Steelers won the Super Bowl, is you're middling. So you keep landing middle to late first round, and that's how you look the rest of the rounds. And sometimes you hit and it goes well, but most of the time it doesn't, because you're not getting the top of the first round, or even sometimes the top of the second round that'll allow you to dip back into the first round. My point being that this is a draft class where, the Steelers have to look long and hard at themselves and say, hey, if we end up at 18 or 20 or 16, well, like we keep ending up, this is the draft where you may want to do what you did with Minkah Fitzpatrick. Obviously, that was a trade situation where you threw in everything but the sink and it paid off. This might be a situation where you throw in everything but the kitchen sink in a draft situation, because these are some generational draft picks at QB that could change this franchise. So I think that's a decision that they have to make. And the Patriots are still looking, despite what we saw at Zappy last night, they've got to make a decision as well.
Yeah, I think the decision's a lot easier for New England, just because you expect them to be in that strike zone,
Indeed.
Right? Where you look at Pittsburgh and you already got 7 wins. Like, what's the floor for you in the draft? If you lose out, you're probably picking 13. That's where we're sitting right now. So from Pittsburgh's perspective, you may transition away from, if you're going to do it, transition away from your head coach, identify what players are 30 plus second, third contract players that you can get more draft assets for. And I don't know about a reset. If you're going to do it, you might as well rebuild it and go for it, because I think that's the only way you put yourself in a position. I think this quarterback class is really interesting too, because the transfer portal has already eaten up a lot of what you would have perceived to be the second tier of draft eligible quarterbacks, and they're staying in school.
Yeah.
So you're going to have Drake May, who goes early. You're going to have Caleb Williams, who goes early. A lot of people like Jaden Daniels. He's a little bit of an untraditional build for the position and a 1-year sample size of really good play. So there'll be some questions there. Get sold on that. I'm not sure. What is Bo Nix going to do after his 18 years of playing college football at the quarterback position? I think he's set the record for most starts at quarterback in FBS history. So
he about to go to
no shade there. He is the oldest, the longest tenured college starting quarterback ever at FBS. From Pittsburgh's perspective, I don't envy where you're at. And I think there is something too. It's really interesting, these team life cycles where teams build themselves up and then there's kind of a natural transition. Really, the only one that's done it successfully over an extended period of time without regressing all the way back to square one again, even if they keep the coach and the brain trust, is New England with Tom Brady. So you look at Mike Tomlin, and he has 8 career playoff wins, and 5 of those, more than half of them, came in his first 4 seasons with the team.
Yeah.
You even look over at Baltimore in the AFC North. John Harbaugh's got half of his playoff wins came in his first 5 years, and he's been there 15 years too. So these teams that are routinely consistently in the hunt,
Mhm.
If you don't go all the way back down, it makes it almost harder for you to gear back up and make a deep run all over again unless you hit the quarterback position. And they didn't do that with Kenny Pickett.
Indeed. And that's my biggest challenge with this team, and feeling like that's why I keep saying middling, because you've done well, but you've not done well enough. And even that one time where you could have done well enough, I think it was 2018, when you had Jacksonville on the ropes and you allowed them to come back and get you. That would have been one opportunity to win big and, maybe get back to the Super Bowl, but obviously didn't happen. So I think it's one of those challenges. Now, here's the interesting part too, because of course, Jarvis, we know we're talking about what the Steelers are looking at under center, because that's kind of how you build out. And we know what we're talking about with the Patriots and how they build out. But an intriguing guy that, of course, we've been looking at for well over a decade, because he's born and raised in the Atlanta metro area. And, that's Justin Fields, and kind of how things play out for him. How does he look in these last couple of games? Does he look like a guy that Chicago says, okay, maybe we want to, keep him around? Probably not. But if not, where does that guy go? Because with the Kenny Pickett, if you don't land here, you'll probably land, in one more spot. You'll be a backup at them, and then maybe you get to show somebody that maybe you are viable as a potential starter. But Justin Fields, this is like a true dress rehearsal / show and prove what you can do, because you're probably not going to stay with Chicago, but you also want to land somewhere where where it's not going to just benefit Chicago that they parted ways with you, but it's going to benefit you too.
Yeah. And I think that, with Justin, like, obviously the talent is there, right? Like, he wouldn't have been taken in the first round if it wasn't. And I just feel like, Chicago Bears is an organization that just hasn't been good with housing a good quarterback, right? Now some
we got one of
reason,
them. Thanks.
right. So one of the reasons may be that he just isn't good, or it just wasn't the right situation. And I feel like a lot of people kind of discredit the latter, because, like, at the end of the day, like, you can have all the talent in the world, but if the situation isn't right, if the head coach isn't right, if the guy that's working with him every day and the quarterback coach isn't right, it's not going to work. Or the guy calling plays, we seen Luke Gessie. He just seems like, okay, I'm going to call plays according to what Justin Fields is really good at. And then, okay, in the first quarter, but then after that, I'm just going to try to make him a pocket passer. Like, it's just not like, you're making yourself look bad when you do stuff like that. As a play caller, you looking incapable, because at the end of the day, it's all about the pros and the Joes, but like the X's and the O's have to fit too. So you have to make it fit. And I think that with Justin, I really feel that he can, with a second chance at another spot, with the right situation, with the right coach, and the right surrounding talent, I really feel like he can get it done. Because I know a lot of people will look at, Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield and say, oh yeah, that never works. But Sam Darnold got a second round pick. So if Chicago wants to trade him, they're going to be able to get some good compensation for him.
Yeah.
And I feel like Justin, in a different situation, maybe even down here in Atlanta, because we know Arthur Smith is really good with reclamation progress. Kyle, you're familiar. Ryan Tannehill, he made him look like a capable quarterback, and I think that Justin is a little bit more talented than Ryan Tannehill, in my humble opinion. So I feel like the situation is right for Justin as he goes down. All he got to do is just continue to try to go out there and put some good tape out there.
Yeah, and Kyle, I look at the situation that's going on. Not that we didn't know that Tua Tagovailoa was capable of what we've seen him do this season, but again, right circumstances, right staff around you, right players around you, and you can not only look like a good quarterback or a solid quarterback, but you'll really be able to show your greatness. And that's maybe what a Justin Fields is lacking. Still doesn't have the right talent around him, definitely doesn't have the right coaching staff around him. And it just seems like he's in an organization that's just, they can't figure it out. They just can't get right. And so if you can't get right as an organization, I don't think you're going to get this guy right either.
Yeah, so there's a lot of hands in the pot here, right? As far as running a football team, running an offense. And the phrase that stands out to me was an interview that I did a few years back with Jordan Palmer, the quarterback coach and private trainer. He said teams bust on players more than players bust on teams. And you look at this environment that Justin Fields was put into, and Tanisha, you invoked Tua Tagovailoa and what that was like with Brian Flores, who was a career assistant at New England. The only quarterback he ever knew was Tom Brady. The only offensive line coach he ever knew was Dante Scarnecchia. Those are like Mount Rushmore of their respective crafts at the NFL level type of players and coaches. And he comes to Miami, and he's got 4 offensive line coaches in 3 years. He has 4 offensive coordinators in 3 years. Jim Caldwell was in and out after a singular cup of coffee before training camp even started. He said, no, thanks. I don't like where this is going. So he stepped aside. And then Mike McDaniel comes in, and it's a stylistic fit, and they tailor what it is. And you've seen like peaks of it with Chicago, like down the stretch last year after the first 2 months of the season. And then they came out this year and they said, everything we did, no, we just traded it. We got DJ Moore. So we're going to be this deep set drop back passing game all over again. And guess what? He's got a 12% sack rate because it's just not what is the strength of him as a player. So I do think you have to continue to individualize what Justin Fields would have around him to be successful. I do happen to think Arthur Smith, that offense that is so run heavy, but you get extra hats in the box with Justin Fields and his threat as a runner versus Desmond Ridder or Taylor Heineke or anybody. Like, that's a whole different ballgame for that offense. And they've invested already in the skill group that would be around him. I think that'd be as exciting of a fit as you could craft for Justin Fields.
Indeed. And the game we're going to talk about with a couple of guys who put the right pieces around them, put the right coaching staff around them, and they absolutely do it. That's Jalen Hurts and Dak Prescott. We're, of course, going to talk about the showdown between the Eagles and Cowboys when we come back. But before we get there, here's a quick word from Jarvis about DoorDash.
Listen up, guys. Jarvis Davis here for DoorDash. This episode of the NFL Kickoff Live Show is brought to you by DoorDash. How about this, y'all? I'm sitting at the house by myself. You know, my kids upstairs sleep in the room, and then I just start feeling this rumbling sensation in my stomach, and I'm just like, oh my God, my stomach is telling me that I need some wings. You know what I went to? I went to DoorDash. I'm telling you guys, it is the absolute amazing. And the code is LOCK23. What is that code going to get me, Jarvis? LOCK23 is going to get you 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. When you download the DoorDash app, drop that code in there, LOCK23, and you can satisfy that hunger in your stomach right now. I'm telling you, it was so amazing. I'm telling you, it is so easy, and then it's so easy to use. And when you think about, you know, when you're watching the games and you're trying to figure out what you want to eat, DoorDash it simplifies it for you guys. All you got to do is just pull out your Lucky Charm jersey and order your favorite apps and snacks on DoorDash, because football season is rolling right along. And if you haven't tried this out, I promise you need to do. So here's what's about to go down. I need you to go to download the DoorDash app, and you're going to get 50% off up to $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. When you download the app, enter the code LOCK23. That's code LOCK23, LOCKED 23, and go ahead and satisfy that hunger.
Well, guys, it's another big showdown for the Eagles this weekend. This time it is with the Dallas Cowboys, front and center, game of the week. NFC East is on the line. Some would even say the MVP race is on the line between Jalen Hurts and Dak Prescott, just behind Brock Purdy in the odds. It's a mood, it's a movie when it's Dallas and Philly playing. And our Locked On Cowboys host, Marcus Mosher, and our Locked On Eagles host, Gino Camilleri, are here to break this game down.
I do think this is a big Brandon Cooks game at home in a dome on a fast track against some older corners. To me, he's the key to this game for the Cowboys. If he has a big game, I don't see the Cowboys losing, but if the Eagles can hold him in check, I think we're going to get a really, really close one.
Tell our fans over at Locked On Eagles how he has been getting that production, though. Has it come through the slot? Has it come through outside, just winning those matchups based on pure speed? For those who might have not seen him play over the last couple weeks,
a lot of long developing over routes where the Cowboys will use 6 and 7 man protections and then just let him try to fly over the field, mostly in man-to-man coverage. What they're trying to do is find your slowest corner, get him matched up one-on-one, get him free releases off the line of scrimmage. But I also mentioned he's been somebody who, when the Cowboys get in the red zone, he's gotten more red zone targets than what CeeDee Lamb has gotten because he is so quick off the line of scrimmage, and teams typically like to play a lot of zone. He just has a great feel of where to settle down in zones. To me, he's the X factor. I get, if the Cowboys can't get him involved early, I won't be surprised if they struggle a little bit on offense.
So I think we both kind of have it the same mantra on this one, where we need our Klay Thompson to kind of step up in this game, right?
You need the role guys to have big games.
Yeah, you need your Brandon Cooks, you need your Devontae Smith, you need your Jake Ferguson, you need your Dallas Goedert. And the last key to victory, I'm going to say, is can DeAndre Swift and this offensive line find a way, whether it's you're leading late in this game, whether it's you're trying to get back to what your identity was of being a balanced offensive line, they've gotten no push. Can you find a way to create some of these explosives? Because like you said, Marcus, it's either A.J. Brown or nothing in terms of the explosives. And early on in the season, a lot of those came through DeAndre Swift being lightning in a bottle. They need to get back to that, because it might come that once again, you're leading a game against the Dallas Cowboys and you have to find a way to choke out the clock. Yep. And if not, Dak can lead them down the field and put them right in a position to score like we saw that last week. I think 3.5 points is bang on. I think Vegas just knows way too much and way more than we ever will. And it's going to be a field goal game, in my opinion, because there's so much riding on it. And just as a neutral fan, like, you're welcome once again. These two teams are just what people want to see. As much as you might hate them and talk bad about them and create your crappy narratives, you guys love watching the Cowboys and Eagles, no matter what you say.
Plus, the Cowboys are wearing their awesome all-white uniforms on Sunday night. It's going to be absolutely.
Ooh, those are going to be pretty on Sunday Night Football.
So, guys, this particular matchup features a team where there's a 1-game division lead, of course, Eagles over the Cowboys, one of 3 division leaders with that slim margin. So we could go all over the place with that narrative heading into the last 5 games of the season. But Kyle, this is also a situation where you've got 2 teams who have, like we said, MVP caliber quarterbacks, but also a lot of X factor. So I want to go back to something that Marcus was talking about in terms of who would be the X factor should the Cowboys win. And he's calling it Brandon Cooks. Is that your guy who could be the X factor or the game changer for these Cowboys to get this win?
Yeah, I certainly think coming into this season, you expected to get a certain caliber of production from Brandon Cooks. And for the first month and a half of the season, he was MIA, like nowhere to be found. And you're wondering, did Brandon Cooks get washed this offseason and we all didn't get the memo or what? And then lo and behold, they start finding ways to get him involved in the offense. And it's coincided with Dak Prescott and this emergence of this 6 consecutive games, I think it is, with multiple touchdown passes, which is the longest stretch of his career, and playing at a caliber that has put him right at the front of the MVP conversation as we go into December. So I certainly think that's an element for Dallas that if they have that component humming, even if it's only a couple shots throughout the course of the game, this feels like an more explosive plays wins the game type of contest in my mind between these two teams, because they're capable of haymakers. You saw Philly really get bottled up by San Francisco at home last week, and San Francisco just hit home run after home run after home run, and a lot of it came after the catch.
Yeah.
So who's your guy that's going to have the speed and help create those chunks? If it's Brandon Cooks, whether they're vertical routes, whether they're deep over routes, and he's turning up the far sideline after he catches the ball, I do think that's a great place to point to for Dallas.
Yeah, not only yards after the catch, but really yards after contact as well, Jarvis, because, Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey were out there bulldozing folks. And from a yak perspective, from a yards after the catch, I was wondering if Darius Slay had gone back to Detroit and, maybe we missed that flight that he'd taken because, he was absentee last week. But if you look on the flip side for the Cowboys, they're looking to break a streak in the East, you don't have back-to-back champions. You have to go back to the early 2000s where the Eagles won 4 in a row to see a back-to-back. That's how competitive this particular division has been. But the Eagles have swooned a little bit over these last couple of weeks, right? Even when they won, sometimes it felt like it was on the struggle bus, granted, against the Chiefs and granted against the Bills before, the slaughtering that was the 49ers game. But who's their X factor? I mean, one person that I think Gino may have mentioned was Devontae Smith, but could be DeAndre Swift as well, depending on which direction you think would win this game for them. Who you feel like is their X factor in order for the Eagles to kind of get back right?
It has to be Jalen Hurts in my eyes, right? Because here's the thing, because he looked weird last week, holding on to the football for so long. Obviously, you have one of the better offensive lines in the NFL. I get it, but get rid of the football, because if Jason Kelce is turned around like, oh, okay, yeah, I got my man. And he still has the football. Oh, he hasn't taken off running. Like, oh, you didn't try to go get yards instead of trying to find somebody downfield when it's just not there. So I think that he has to be a little bit more decisive to the football with the football. Help your offensive line out, because I think that is something that could be a catch-22, because a lot of times guys want to put everybody look at the sack numbers. Oh, he's been sacked X amount of times, and automatically blame the offensive line, but there are times where the quarterback is holding on to the football too long, or they're just not throwing it away when there's nothing there. And I think that I saw Jalen do that several times last week. And I think that also he can be a bigger X factor with call runs, design run plays. I think that helps that offense out tremendously, because once you start getting guys coming down, dropping 8 men in the box, and you start seeing that single high safety, and then for some strange reason they try to maybe even single cover AJ Brown on the outside. Those are things that I feel like Jalen can take advantage of. You make the reads a little bit more simpler. They're simplified when the team start playing against the run. So I think Jalen getting rid of the football, making sure that he's on point, and then if it's not there, just throw the football away. And I feel like some design runs will get the Eagles a win in this one.
But do you think maybe the Eagles have gone away from that because low-key, obviously they wouldn't tell us the truth, but right, he's not quite his 100% self. And so the explosiveness that they could expect from him in those run design plays, maybe it's not there because he can't run like Jalen can run. And maybe that's a part of the reason he's holding the ball, because he's like, he knows that he can't be his explosive self on the ground.
I think that could be a factor. But here's the thing. If you're out there, if you're putting him out there, if there's nothing on the injury report saying that, hey, he's dealing with X, Y, Z, or hey, he's questionable, I have to go off of what I see. And I see that you all need to call some design runs for you, because you have the offensive line to do it. Go ahead and do it. And I think that, turn around and handing the football with DeAndre Swift, that helps as well. And, he can be a little inconsistent sometimes, and that's why he's not in Detroit any longer. But those are some of the things that you're going to have to do. If you're putting them out there, I feel like, hey, I don't want to hear about it. Like I got Hugh Douglas up in Philly. He's just like, hey, man, show me the baby. If you out there, show me the baby. Show me the production. Get the win. Prove to people that, hey, you deserve this big boy salary that you got. All those things come into play when you're going out there each and every day, and that injury report is clear. I don't want to hear it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and that's kind of the tough part. But you think about, too, Kyle, and as good as Dallas has looked as far as that offense is concerned, 41-35. And I'm not saying that the Seahawks can't produce. I'm just saying that 41-35 against the Seahawks is 41-35 against the Seahawks. So it's one of those where could this possibly be a shootout where a team like the Eagles maybe arguably have a better defense than maybe the Seahawks had? Then if it becomes a shootout, that could be a possibility for them to still get a win here.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, but because you came into this game with Thursday Night Football with Dallas and Seattle last week, and Seattle's a team, they want to run the ball, right? They don't have Kenneth Walker. They end up having Zach Charbonnet that steps into the primary role, has 19 carries for 60 yards. If you told me Dallas held Zach Charbonnet to 19 carries for 60 yards, you'd feel really good about it. But it was the physicality of DK Metcalf. It was his ability, how involved he got early. So I'm looking over to AJ Brown, and if I'm Philadelphia, you got to have a certain element of that. But one thing that Seattle did try to do is they still tried to run the ball, even though the averages weren't there. And to go back to what JD was talking about, as far as DeAndre Swift and the Philadelphia Eagles, you go all the way back to week 2. And do you remember how much Philadelphia struggled in the first half against Minnesota? And they had all these exotic looks on the front. And then about halfway through the second quarter, they said, oh, hey, you know what? You got 2 defensive linemen on the field. We're going to pound the rock. And DeAndre Swift gets 28 carries, 175 yards, takes like sole possession of the RB1 role in Philadelphia. And since then, he's only had a handful of games where he's even had 20 touches.
Yeah.
Like this is a guy that's amongst the most productive backs in the league. And, right. And what game was it? Was it the Buffalo game or the Kansas City game that like he didn't even touch the ball in the first half at all? And you're like, what is going on? This is like the second best rusher from a statistical standpoint in the NFC. And he didn't touch the ball. And then lo and behold, he starts touching the ball. You're ripping off 6, 7, 8 yard, 9-yard runs. And Philadelphia found its rhythm again offensively. So you got to find a way to distribute the ball all around. But I think balance for Philadelphia against Dallas defense will help give them the opportunities to have those one-on-ones for that big physical guy like A.J. Brown to do what DK Metcalf was able to do to him last week.
Indeed. And KC, if you had to make a prediction, a bold prediction, who walks away with this win? Do the Eagles put some distance between themselves and the Cowboys in the NFC East? Or is this a Cowboys game where they're now going to get in position to possibly control their own destiny?
I want to pick Dallas. Dak is 30-8.
That is rare, Kyle. Not a lot of people ever like to do anything in favor of Dallas, but okay.
but I cannot help but think that the worst thing Dallas could have drawn was Philadelphia getting their butts kicked. And I think Philadelphia, after the game that they played last week, with an opportunity to retain control and effectively smother the NFC East, I think Philly finds a way. And I'm picking Philly in a close game to get it done.
JD, who you got?
So my dad is a lifelong Dallas Cowboys fan. Please don't ask me how. Grown up in Atlanta all his life and all that stuff. But we had a conversation. He was just like, Jarvis, we're gonna get a win this week. I was like, man, I don't know, man. But I was like, and then when you think about it and kind of really dig into it, like I think that Brandon Cooks piece, what Marcus brought up, was absolutely amazing. During that 4-game winning streak, 20 catches, 300 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Almost double the production of that first month and a half of the season as a Cowboy. So I think finding another weapon that Dak can depend on outside of CD Lamb, I think that's the formula. That's the juice. That's that recipe everybody look forward to eating on Thanksgiving. Like, okay, we're coming over to the Cowboys house because hey, they found the right recipe. Their offense is cooking, and I think that Dak is making a MVP candidacy. So I'm picking the Cowboys, T. I'm picking them. And I might be wrong. More than like I'll be wrong because it's the Cowboys. But I'm rolling with the Cowboys. I can't deny what I'm seeing right now.
Exactly, because Cowboys are gonna cowboy. But the Eagles, I think, as long as that secondary shows up a bit better than they did last week, and they do everything that KC just prescribed, I picked them for the win. Speaking of picks, we're going to tell you and sell you why on the other side. But before we do that, Jarvis is here to sell you on Prize Picks.
Jarvis Davis here for Prize Picks. This episode of NFL Kickoff Live Show is brought to you by Prize Picks. It is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. That's a pretty big deal, folks. We are the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's you against the numbers, not the pros and not all of these algorithms and all this stuff craziness, right? All you got to do is just pick more or less than on a 2 to 6 player stat projection and watch the winnings roll right in. Also, not only with the NFL season rolling, it's kicking off. Basketball season, guys, is right here. And now you can pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League, a league created specifically for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, LeBron James on the plus Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3 points made plus receptions. That's not that hard, folks. It's not as hard as I made it look. Sound right then. But it's easy, guys. All you got to do is go to prizepicks.com right now because that is the best place to go to. All right, here's the website. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedonnfl. Prizepicks.com/lockedonnfl and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. And folks, Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy.
All right, so the Seattle Seahawks are hitting the road to take on the San Francisco 49ers. The Seahawks are 10.5-point underdogs in that game. Of course, the 49ers won the last game 31-13 just 2.5 weeks ago, and we know that they have steadily gotten better. So this will be interesting to see how it goes. But first, Corbin Smith is going to tell us he's going to sell us rather on why the Seahawks can cover as underdogs.
Looking for their first win against the 49ers since 2021, the Seahawks will head to Levi Stadium for a must-win rematch against their division rivals on Sunday afternoon. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast. The Seahawks will enter Sunday's rematch against the 49ers as 10.5-point underdogs, and honestly, that feels a little bit low considering how much San Francisco has dominated this series over the last 2 seasons. None of their previous 4 encounters since the start of the 2022 season have been decided by under 15 points, with the 49ers winning all 4 of those matchups, including a 31-13 victory at Lumen Field just 2 weeks ago. For the Seahawks to have any chance to cover that spread or potentially pull an upset on the road at Levi Stadium, the offense is going to have to build off a solid outing in Dallas where they scored 35 points and put up 5 touchdowns. The offense has only 3 offensive touchdowns in their last 4 games against the 49ers combined. The run game is going to have to be solid. They're going to have a play-action game working off of that to take advantage of their receiving talent. As for the defensive side of the football, missed tackles have been a major problem against the 49ers, including a bunch of missed tackles against Christian McCaffrey a few weeks ago. They have to get him to the ground, and they have to limit explosives. They gave up 7 explosive pass and run plays in the first half alone in week 12. If they're able to cut that number in half and potentially create a turnover or 2, the Seahawks can give themselves a chance in a game that few expect them to be competitive in this upcoming weekend.
Our guy Corbin pulled absolutely no punches. All right, Jarvis, I'm going to ask if you can maybe wrap your arms around little Tink Tink and give me a path to winning for the Seahawks.
Sorry, little Tink Tink. It's time to go home. Take your little ball and go home because the Seahawks just, they're on 3-game losing streak. They lost to the Cowboys. They pushed them to the brink. Don't get me wrong, but I think just, with Kenny Walker being out, Kyle, I really feel like Charbonnet is a drop-off. It's a pretty decent drop-off when you talk about, the type of running backs that they bring to the table. And the way the San Francisco 49ers have been playing, they just seem different. I know they've been, going to NFC championships and just being that type of team. But ever since Purdy came back and that man, that man that plays left tackle, number 71, Trent Williams, yeah, this team is different. And Debo Samuel, those guys, when you have those guys coming back into the fold, this is a different team. Those guys are playmakers, and you just see how Kyle calls plays just like who's going to get the rock, and there's nothing you can do about it. So, yeah, I feel like Seattle is about to get ready to go into a buzzsaw. The 49ers are riding high because we know all of the hoopla and drama that went into that game against the Philadelphia Eagles and how they were able to, talk that talk and walk that walk. Yeah, I feel for the Seattle Seahawks right now because this is not a good matchup for them given the circumstances.
Well, Kyle, I'll let you come back with that one because, no lies told right there. No lies told.
Yeah, so for Seattle to win this football game or keep it within less than a touchdown and field goal and cover 8.5 points, I really think they have to force multiple turnovers and then you score 35 points. Okay? The obvious talking points to acknowledge, but the hardship about doing that, and give them credit, they just scored a bunch of points, 35 points against the Dallas Cowboys last week. They get a little extra rest coming into the game. JD talked about Trent Williams, Debo Samuel, that stretch of injuries. Here's the points scored for San Francisco in the 3 games that they had without those guys, 17, 17, and 17. Okay, I'm not a math guy, but I could say that's 17 points a game. The points in the other games that they've played with those guys on the field, 30, 30, 30, 35, 42, 34, 27. Shout out Tampa Bay, held them under 30, 31, and 42. They are rolling up the points.
Dude.
And oh, by the way, outside of that 3-game stretch where they had 7 turnovers without Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel, they have 3 turnovers this season offensively. San Francisco has 3 turnovers in the games that they played with Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel on the field. It's December. They have 1 turnover in the month of November. So, like,
tell you, man.
Seattle is just going to have to get this totally uncharacteristic performance that San Francisco has not done with their guys all season long. And if they can do that, hey, there's your selling point to cover 8.5 points.
Yeah, and my mind went to the only way it would possibly happen is sometimes you are so on mission to prove yourself. I think the 49ers are so on mission to prove that they belonged in the Super Bowl last season versus the Eagles that maybe an emotional letdown may allow the Seahawks to sneak in and get this game. But other than that, yeah, it's going to be a tall order to even cover the spread. Now, in a battle between top-tier quarterbacks, the Kansas City Chiefs host the Buffalo Bills on Sunday afternoon. The Chiefs are 1.5-point favorites in that game. And here's Ryan Tracy from Locked On Chiefs to tell you why the Chiefs can cover that spread.
The key for the Kansas City Chiefs to cover the spread and get a win against the Buffalo Bills is straightforward. Keep it simple, silly. Don't get overly complex. Don't go outside your wheelhouse. Stick to what works. I'm Ryan Tracy from Locked On Chiefs, and that's where we are this week. For the Kansas City Chiefs, it starts with the run game. Isaiah Pacheco has been missing in action at practice, but could be available for the ball game itself. His backups, Jerick McKinnon and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, will be ready to go. And they've been much more successful at running the power run block scheme lately that they'll be able to double down on and attack the Bills on the ground. That sets up the pass game, which has been a struggle. It comes down to this. In order to move the ball, you have to feed Travis Kelce first and foremost. The plan will be to take him away. So where do you go after that? Rashee Rice is the emerging talent that will be the number 1 wide receiver, and you have to feed him. It is a dual-pronged passing attack that everything else branches off of, including Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, and possibly Richie James, who can maybe give a little bit of lift in this particular ball game. All that goes down to protecting Patrick, giving him time in the pocket, not making him wait till late in downs to try to make something happen. On the opposite side of the ball, it's about containing Josh Allen as you do a contain rush. You're not going to get the super exotic blitzes. You don't want to flush him unnecessarily. He went for 9 for 81 last week on the ground. You don't want to trigger that. But the trio of pass catchers is going to be a great matchup. L'Jarius Sneed should travel with Stephon Diggs all over the place. That will leave Gabe Davis outside against a couple of young corners, as well as Khalil Shakir, who's been hot on and off of late, against Trent McDuffie. I feel great about that matchup, and I think Shakir isn't going to be someone who's going to be able to break this game open with McDuffie all over him. So it will come down to Gabe Davis, and more importantly, Dalton Kincaid and how he attacks the linebacker level that might be without Drew Tranquill, might be without Nick Bolton. It's down the middle in this game for the Buffalo Bills. It is Dalton Kincaid against those linebackers, Khalil Shakir against those safeties once he breaks loose, as the safeties will be with Mike Edwards rather than Brian Cook, who's out with injury as well. And that's how the Chiefs can get it done this week against the Buffalo Bills.
And when you think about that game and who could or may not have an impact on the game, unfortunately, we just got word that Isaiah Pacheco is, of course, out for this Sunday's matchup. And that's a critical component because, yes, it's great to get Clyde Edwards-Helaire back, but on the same token, it's always been kind of a 1-2, if not 1-2-3 punch when it comes to the run game for the Kansas City Chiefs. So, I mean, Jarvis, how do you think it's going to impact them not to have Pacheco out there this Sunday?
Oh, it's gonna be a tremendous in my eyes. I mean, let me start off by saying this: they're gonna count on Jordan to get the job done. Patrick Mahomes. He's Michael Jordan in football right now. That's kind of where I know we've been throwing that term around a lot lately. T, when it comes to the Atlanta Falcons and Jesse Bates, but when you think about what this offense looks like, the toughness and the offensive line, the investment in the offensive line, and Donovan Smith and Jawan Taylor bringing those guys in. You know that they want to have some sort of identity and balance to this offense and not have to always depend on Patrick Mahomes. But when you take a guy like Isaiah Pacheco out of that equation, like, because this dude just runs so hard. It seems like he's just fighting for every single yard. And then what comes with that, though, is the dealing with the injuries and dealing with certain things and little knickknacks from time to time. And this offense just looked different without him in that equation. So I think that you're going to have to essentially lean on your MVP quarterback to be able to sling the ball around the yard. And you hope and pray that those wide receivers, they step up and they make those necessary plays, because Pat is going to find those guys, and they have to be able to catch the football and make a play with it.
Yeah, and although it was, of course, a loss for the Chiefs against the Packers earlier this week, you got 18 carries and 110 yards from Pacheco, 6.1 averages yards per carry, and across the entire season, 4.4. So just showing that consistency of what he brings to the table, or will not be able to bring to the table this weekend. But KC, when you look at this matchup with the Chiefs being 1.5-point favorites in that game, so tell me, do you believe that the Chiefs can cover that spread? And if so, how do they cover the spread?
I absolutely think they can. I think the challenge for Kansas City is Buffalo is fighting for their playoff lives here at 500 at 6-6, and they put a really good effort forward offensively against Philadelphia. The overtime game, Jalen Hurts brought them back and pushed them to 6-6, and just about everything since the bye has been a nightmare for Buffalo. And it'd be really interesting to see how they respond to the story that came out about Sean McDermott this week, and Von Miller and his off the field issues that manifested during the bye week as well, with some really ugly allegations there. And we need more clarity there as well. But for Kansas City's perspective, we're talking running backs, we're talking wide receivers. Can we throw Travis Kelce the damn football? What are we doing here? I'm watching this Green Bay game, and you scored 19 points. Travis Kelce, I think, had all those receptions in the first half of the game, it felt like. You're sitting here, these possessions down the stretch, you're like, all right, they got to get something going. Let's move Travis Kelce around a little bit and get him the football. He caught 4 passes. And you're looking at Kansas City's last month offensively and all these stretches of games where they're not scoring any points in the second half of these games. Go back to Denver. No, he had 6.4 yards per target. He had 9 targets for 6 catches, 9.7 yards per catch. Miami caught 3 passes for 14 yards. Philadelphia, they scored 17 points. Got 7 for 44. He got a touchdown, but it was 4.5 or 4.9 yards per target.
Yeah.
And then he has the big boom against Green Bay early in that game. And then they're trying to come back and win this football game. And we're just static with Travis Kelce. We're not moving him around. And I get he's going to command a lot of attention. But you're coming into this game when Buffalo doesn't have Matt Milano, and Micah Hyde and Jordan Porter look a step slower than what they've been in the past. Get Travis Kelce involved in the middle of the field, move him around, get him the football. And if you do that, I think you do win the football game, but they just really haven't been doing it the last month for Travis Kelce.
Yeah, and I think one of the points that you make as well is, in addition to, the Chiefs needing to get back to their identity, at least they kind of have an understanding of their identity, regardless of what we kind of saw in that Packers game earlier this week. But I think you make a great point too, KC, about the Bills need to take care of Bills things, because they do have issues like the off field issues that came to light earlier this week with Von Miller. We're just now getting notification as well from multiple sources that Shaq Lawson was fined an undisclosed amount for his interaction with a fan in the game against the Eagles. And so the issue's been resolved. But Casey, when you start hearing things like that, it makes you think to yourself, but has the issue really been resolved with a team that's middling? And then you get the information about Sean McDermott that comes out, where he has comments that he made about the September 11th terrorist attacks during a team meeting in 2019. And of course, he goes on to say that he regretted those comments, but ultimately speaking, that's all that the conversation has been about as it relates to Chiefs Bills. It hasn't been more about what's gone on the field as off the field. And it starts right at the top with Sean McDermott.
It's tough. And as a team that's fighting for expectations, you can tell how frustrated that football team is when you look back on the interaction with the Buffalo Bills defensive linemen in Philadelphia in that contest, and how they're chirping with the fans. And I think there's a lot of things that Buffalo has that they can point to feel like they can win any game that they step on the field with. But so many of their wounds this season have been self-inflicted, whether it was the 4 turnovers in the season opener against the Jets, or 12 men on the field for the missed field goal against the Broncos that cost you another football game. Like, you just have perpetually shot yourself in the foot. 20 seconds not going to get points on the field when you had a timeout in 20 seconds with Josh Allen at the end of that game against the Eagles.
Yeah.
So all of those things now compounding, you see the frustration that's being acted out on the sideline, and now you have distractions coming into this game. It's a really unenviable place, and it's going to go one of two ways. Buffalo's going to come out, and they're going to be as channeled as they've ever been, and they'll put a good effort forward, and they'll find a way to win this football game, or they're going to get waxed. And I don't think there's a lot of room in the middle.
Yeah, I would agree as well, Jarvis, because you think about those kinds of very those comments that can really, really kind of separate and divide, especially if it's one of those things where maybe you kind of put it to bed 4 years ago, but maybe you kind of didn't because it could have played in the back of individuals' minds. Now you bring that to the surface where basically McDermott's making a comparison contrast that he's encouraging athletes on how they viewed the Al-Qaeda militants to say that the way that they crashed the passenger jets into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, it's like being team players. That's something to where you can apologize, but if someone felt some type of way when they first heard that and that brings up feelings again, you never know where that can take a locker room.
Absolutely. And I think I know where it could take it. It's lost. He's lost his locker room because when things like this get out, when you have players griping at each other on the sidelines and don't really care about what it looks like, because, a lot of times locker rooms, being in the locker room, like there are so many different personalities, right? Like a lot of people from different backgrounds, people who probably wouldn't even be in the same room with that person if they weren't playing football. Like football does, it puts a lot of different type of people in the same place. And I think that there's a certain, sacredness that goes with it that, whatever goes on within that, you don't let it get out. And so when stuff like this starts to come out, when whatever sources, said that he said XYZ and he has to explain himself, that lets you know that he knows that he's losing this locker room. And then when things like this start to happen, that means he's lost it. And I think that, when you have all the off the field stuff going on, I talked about when we first started this show, organizations that you hear more about off the field stuff than on the field stuff, that's not a good sign. That means they're a bad organization. And the Buffalo Bills ownership, they don't want to be looked at as that. They feel like they're Super Bowl contenders. They have a Super Bowl capable of winning quarterback in Josh Allen. So I think right now, Sean McDermott, needs to start counting his chickens because this may signal the end for him for sure.
Yeah, this is definitely a fork in the road for that franchise, but more importantly, probably that regime. Now, it is almost time for our fantasy football focus, which also means it's time for Jarvis to tell you guys about DoorDash.
Jarvis Davis here for DoorDash. I need you people to get prepared before game day. Stock up on your favorite appetizers and order all your tailgate gear on DoorDash. Then get ready to watch your team win. I just started talking about the Bills. I don't know if y'all gonna win, but yeah, you can watch your team and have a good time regardless of the result and get you some good food. I'm talking about all of your favorite restaurants from retail to grocery are on the app, so you can shop everything you need to get game day ready. I know me. I might try to fire out my grill on Sunday because I want to watch the Falcons and see what's going on. You know what? I want to give me some wings. I want to fry them bad boys up. So, I'm going to go on a DoorDash, find my little neighborhood grocery store and order me some flour. Give me some seasonings. Get some oil. I need some good oil so I can fry those wings up. And then, and guess what? I haven't even left my house. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to do the same. All you got to do is go to DoorDash, and you're going to get 50% off up to a $10 value on your first order when you spend $15 or more when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCK23. That's code LOCK23, LOCKED 23. Subject to change. Terms apply.
So your fantasy team might have been personally traumatized by all of these QB injuries of late, but our Michelle Majuk might just have an answer for you. And here's our Locked On Fantasy host to give you all the info you need for this week and beyond.
Are you a victim to your fantasy quarterback going down with an injury and need a quarterback to play in week 14 or even for the rest of the season? I got you. Here are 3 quarterbacks that you should consider picking up and playing, at least for this week. So first up being Vikings quarterback Joshua Dobbs. I know it was brutal before their bye week, right? He threw 4 interceptions in week 12, and then the Vikings had their bye week. But don't forget, weeks 8 through 11, he was killing it for fantasy. He was averaging over 22 fantasy points per game. He was a quarterback 6 in fantasy during that span. And now he gets the Raiders, Bengals, and Lions over the next 3 weeks. All really solid matchups for him. So I think Joshua Dobbs is a guy you can pick up, play this week, and also just count on for this whole long run of stretch here for the rest of your fantasy season. Another quarterback to consider is Jake Browning of the Bengals. I know we've only really got to see him in 1 full game, but it was amazing, right? He put up nearly 27 fantasy points in week 13, 4th most on the week by any quarterback this last week. And he just has so many great weapons to rely on. Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. And he was smart. He just threw it up to Jamar Chase over and over and over again. And he got him a lot of passing yards and a lot of fantasy points. And over the next 3 weeks, he gets the Colts, Vikings, and Steelers. I am fine with all 3 of those matchups for my fantasy quarterbacks, but especially like him this week against the Colts. And then talking about the Colts, Gardner Minshew is a guy you can consider picking up and playing, especially for this week and maybe even next week. So last week, he had over 300 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns. No team is allowing more passing yards per attempt than the Bengals. And then if he does well this week and you want to continue playing him, he gets the Steelers the next week. And we just saw the Steelers let Bailey Zappi throw all over them on Thursday Night Football. So Gardner Minshew, Jake Browning, and Joshua Dobbs are all options for you this week if you're in a bind at the quarterback position.
Wow, that must be some kind of bind if you are going to go with Dobbs, Minshew, and Browning, Casey. Whoo, is your fantasy?
A lot of jobs out there, T.
Right.
The quarterback position. A lot of jobs. I understand.
Right. So I'm like, okay, this goes back to what Jarvis said earlier, Casey. Are we looking for pros or Joes to add to our fantasy football team?
Yeah, well, out of the ones that Michelle gave, the one I don't want to touch is Josh Dobbs. I've seen Cinderella when I was a kid, and I know when the clock strikes midnight, that carriage turns into a pumpkin, right? And that performance was so bad against Chicago, like did not know what way was up. And they were considering benching him during the bye week. It came out and said that he was going to retain his starting job. Thanks, no thanks for me on Josh Dobbs. I think Jake Browning's the one to go with just from take the one with the weapons in the passing game. Indianapolis, Gardner Minshew's done a nice job. He's able to move around, get off his spot. But at the end of the day, that's a team that wants to run the football. You saw what it looked like with Zach Moss before Jonathan Taylor came back, and then Jonathan Taylor came back. And that's kind of the identity of that football team. The identity of this Cincinnati offense, even though Chase Brown has given a little bit of extra life into the run game, they're built to throw the ball. So take the guy who's built to throw the ball, who's thrown to elite targets. That would be my choice, would be Jake Brown.
Yeah, because I almost got like feeling some type of way, Jarvis, a little triggered with Josh Dobbs. Like, dang, like we let him go. And then I was reminded, oh yeah, we let him go. So as the Steelers, but yeah, I think you make a great point, KC. I mean, Jarvis, if you have Jamar Chase for one, that you can just toss the ball all around the football field to, you might want to go with that guy if for no other reason. He's going to be the guy who covers all the ills that might happen and make Browning look even better.
And you know what? To be honest with you, like we even got a little glimpse into this, like once the Cincinnati offense got rolling, because we know Joe was dealing with with his injuries earlier in the season. Then they just start saying, hey, you know what? We just gonna get the ball out of his hands. We're gonna throw these quick screens. We're gonna dump it off to Joe Mixon, and guess what? You could do the exact same thing with Jake Browning, because that stuff is simple. It's simple, and it caters to the ability of your quarterback. Now, you can throw the football down the field, true enough, when the opportunity presents itself. But like the game plans going from here on out have to be, hey, get the ball in your playmaker's hands, whether they be turned around and handing it off 25 times or 25 to 30 times with your running back combo, or you getting the ball to Tyler Boyd, you getting the ball to T. Higgins, who's back, and then Jamar Chase, who won the best wide receiver in the NFL. So all of those things. It's just set up perfectly for Jake Browning going forward, and the Bengals should be able to take advantage.
Hey, KC, as we wrap up here real quick, what's that one game you have your eye on this weekend?
I think I'm looking at Indianapolis and Cincinnati as far as that AFC wild card race. When you consider you've got the 5 seed is 7-5, and the 11 seed in the conference is 6-6.
Yeah,
you got a ton of teams that are just smashed together. Half of them are going to miss the playoffs.
Yep,
and that's a head-to-head matchup at 1:00 that's going to have a lot on the line for the AFC conference.
Indeed. How about you, Jarvis? Real quick, what's your game to watch?
Got to be Falcons Buccaneers. This is the game the playoff game within the playoff game, and this is for the title of, hey, we're the best team in the worst conference in the NFL. Let's see what
there is. On that note, a lot of cool matchups that are going to be some decision-making games for how these playoffs play out, both in the AFC and the NFC. Thanks again, guys, as always, for stopping by NFL Kickoff Live. It is the best NFL talk you can get anywhere. For Jarvis Davis, Kyle Krabs, I'm Tanisha Batiste. We will see you next week.